Following the heart-wrenching loss of his dearly loved wife, Ella, Wilma Castro, the distinguished leader of a thriving food enterprise, was convinced that love and joy had forever eluded him. The deep sorrow that enveloped him seemed unending, as if the grief would linger eternally. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Yet the adage that grief's shadow lasts for 3 years proved to hold truth. Amid this storm of despair, Anna, Wilma's nurturing mother, persistently urged him to embrace the possibility of new beginnings. "Darling," she would say with a gentle, yet firm resolve, "your little son, Tio, needs the warmth and care of a mother. You must continue to live and seek out a woman who will not only be a devoted wife, but also a loving mother to our precious Tio. The right woman is out there, waiting for you." Fate took a turn when Wilma encountered Ingrid, a beacon of hope in his world of desolation. Within just a week, he was struck by the profound realization that Ingrid was the woman with whom he wanted to share the rest of his life. Her immediate and heartfelt connection with his 6-year-old son, Tio, was a testament to their destined bond and a compelling reason for their union. A few months later, Wilma asked Ingrid to marry him, and their wedding was a celebration of newfound love and joy. Anna's heart swelled with happiness, and she remarked with a sense of peace, "Now I can face my end without fear. You and Tio are in capable hands." Wilma, slightly dismissive of his mother's sentiments, retorted, "Mom, please stop with the gloomy talk. Ingrid and I haven't even given you a granddaughter, yet you'll certainly live to dance at Tio's wedding." After a blissful honeymoon in the Seychelles, the newlyweds embarked on their shared journey of family life, which Wilma found to be wonderfully fulfilling. However, their happiness was soon overshadowed by a troubling issue. Tio began to suffer from frequent illnesses, leaving his father in a state of bewilderment. Ingrid, deeply caring and attentive, crafted a nurturing environment for the young boy, but his health continued to falter. Each illness seemed to follow the last, from a simple runny nose to a sore throat, and even bronchitis. Ingrid, ever thoughtful, suggested, "What if we send Tio to a health camp for a while?" Wilma, troubled by the thought, replied, "But Tio has never been away from home for such an extended period." Ingrid, with a reassuring tone, countered, "There's always a first time for everything. This experience could be beneficial for him." "But he's only 6 years old," Wilma protested. "It feels too soon for him to be away from us for so long." "I understand your hesitation, but I believe it could be advantageous for Tio," Ingrid said with conviction. "He'll gain independence, enjoy fresh air, and benefit from a change in environment and climate. Have you considered that city life might not be ideal for him?" Wilma, visibly troubled, admitted, "I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm completely at a loss now. Everything seemed fine before, but now he's perpetually unwell." Ingrid's suggestion hung in the air as Wilma grappled with the dilemma, hoping for clarity and relief for his ailing son. Ingrid, her voice trembling and her eyes glistening with unshed tears, confided in Wilma, "I do everything in my power to shield Tio from viruses, but it seems like all my efforts are in vain. I meticulously monitor his diet and ensure his room is aired regularly, yet his suffering persists. I am heartbroken seeing him endure so much. My love for him is boundless, and it pains me deeply to witness his distress." Wilma, trying to be practical, suggested, "Perhaps we should reduce the frequency of airing his room. It seems quite chilly in there." Ingrid shook her head, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "It's not the cold that's the problem. It's much worse for him when the room gets too hot. Fresh air helps in reducing germs and keeping him healthy, but I must admit, I'm not a medical expert. At the camp, he'll be under the supervision of specialists who can provide the care he needs." Wilma, reflecting on Ingrid's words, slowly nodded in agreement. "You might be right," he conceded thoughtfully. "Maybe a health camp could indeed be a good solution. I'll consider it further. Thank you, my dear, for all the care and concern you've shown for my son." Determined to find the best solution for Tio, Wilma began researching various children's recreation centers. He soon discovered a promising option and reached out to the camp's administration for more details. A warm and reassuring voice on the other end of the line informed him, "We offer personalized care for each child. The minimum stay is 2 months." 2 months, Wilma echoed, his voice filled with reluctance and a hint of despair. The thought of being separated from Tio for that long was daunting, even though he struggled to grasp the full necessity of the camp. "Yes, 2 months," the administrator confirmed kindly. "But don't worry, you're welcome to visit your child on any day that suits you." Relief mingled with apprehension in Wilma's voice as he responded, "That doesn't sound too bad. How do I proceed with the enrollment?" The administrator provided all the necessary information, and Wilma set about preparing Tio for the upcoming adventure. To his surprise, Tio's reaction was one of eager anticipation. The little boy's face lit up with excitement as he asked, "Will I get to play with other kids there, Dad?" Seeing the sparkle in his son's eyes, Wilma felt a wave of emotion wash over him. It was a mix of sadness and hope as he realized that this new experience might just be what Tio needed. Wilma knew all too well that Tio's lack of peer interaction had been a growing concern. The boy used to go to school, but after a series of relentless colds, Wilma had withdrawn him to keep him safe. Ingrid's suggestion of a health camp now seemed like a lifeline for Tio, offering not only medical care but also a chance to connect with other children. Yet just a week before Tio was set to leave for the camp, disaster struck. Tio complained of an excruciating headache. Wilma, his heart racing, touched Tio's forehead and recoiled in shock. The heat radiating from it was almost unbearable. The thermometer confirmed his fears, reading nearly 40 degrees Celsius. "Oh God, this is the last thing we need," Wilma murmured in despair, sinking heavily into a chair. Ingrid, having heard her husband's anguished words, rushed in. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "Tio is sick again," Wilma replied, his voice tinged with frustration and worry. "And it seems quite serious." Ingrid's eyes widened as she took in the sight of Tio. His face was flushed, and beads of sweat glistened on his fevered brow. "It looks like we might have to postpone the trip," Wilma said, his voice heavy with resignation. "First, we need to see a doctor." "Are you sure? We still have a week before we leave. Maybe he'll get better on his own," Ingrid suggested, though doubt clouded her tone. Despite her hope, the next day revealed no improvement. The doctor, after a thorough examination, firmly stated that the trip was no longer feasible. "I would strongly advise hiring a qualified nurse," the doctor recommended. "I understand." "Thank you," Wilma replied, though his heart sank with the weight of the new challenge. Ingrid's face was a picture of disbelief as the doctor departed. "Why do we need a nurse? Why a stranger in our home?" Wilma's patience wore thin. "Do you have any medical knowledge?" he asked, his voice unyielding. When it came to Tio's health, Wilma's resolve was unshakable. "Well, no, but..." "Then this discussion is over," he said firmly. "Tonight, I will search for a nurse on the agency's website." Seeing that Wilma's decision was final, Ingrid nodded, albeit reluctantly. "All right, I understand," she said quietly. "I'll take care of Tio. If there's an emergency, I'll call you." Wilma quickly attended to pressing matters at work, his mind occupied with Tio's condition. Despite his trust in Ingrid, he felt a sense of unease, believing he'd be more at ease if Tio were close by. On his way home, while driving across a bridge, he noticed a young girl standing precariously by the railing, her gaze distant and resigned. With horror, he saw her prepare to leap. Slamming on the brakes, Wilma leaped out of the car, his heart pounding. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, rushing to pull her away from the edge. Are you so exhausted from life that you're ready to end it all? Tears streamed down the girl's face as she sobbed, "Yes, I'm tired. This isn't living, it's just suffering." "Come on, let's get away from here," Wilma said, his voice gentler now but still urgent. After a moment of hesitation, the girl reluctantly followed him to the car. "What's your name?" Wilma asked, trying to offer her some comfort. "Corey," the girl replied softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Corey, can you tell me why such a young and beautiful girl feels that life is nothing but suffering?" Wilma asked gently, his concern evident. With tears streaming down her face, Corey responded, "I'm pregnant," her voice cracking with the weight of her grief. "Wow, congratulations," Wilma said, shaking his head, a mix of disapproval and sorrow in his eyes. "So you've decided to not only sabotage your future but also jeopardize your innocent children." Corey's sobs deepened as she continued, "My fiancé left me. I trusted him completely, and he betrayed me most cruelly." Wilma sighed, understanding her pain but remaining firm. "I get that you're hurting, but ending your life and your child's is not the answer." Corey sighed heavily. "It's easy for you to say. I have no support, no home to go to." "What about your parents?" Wilma inquired, hoping there might be some form of family support. Corey's face fell further as she shared her story. Her father had abandoned the family when she was just 2 years old, leaving her mother to raise her alone. When Corey was 14, her mother met Bob. Bob moved into their modest village home and took on various repairs, initially presenting himself as a diligent worker. Both mother and daughter were initially grateful for his help. However, their seemingly idyllic life unraveled after 3 months. Bob began to fall into periods of heavy drinking that would stretch on for months at a time. "Mom, why don't you just kick him out?" Corey had asked in frustration. "Why do you need him?" Her mother sighed and replied, "You wouldn't understand. Even though he has his flaws, he's still mine." Then her mother's health took a tragic turn. Diagnosed with a terminal illness, her condition rapidly deteriorated. Bob continued to live with Corey, declaring, "I'm registered here, so I'm not going anywhere." Corey was forced to tolerate Bob's presence, despite his estrangement from her. Later, Corey found a semblance of hope with Steve, a young man with whom she rented an apartment. But the joy of living together was short-lived. When Corey discovered she was pregnant, Steve's reaction was anything but supportive. She was forced to leave the apartment and return to her mother's house, only to find it had burned down. Bob claimed it was due to old wiring, but Corey suspected it was more likely caused by his reckless smoking habits. As Wilma listened to Corey's harrowing tale, his thoughts shifted to another concern. He had noticed the nurse, whom he had hired for TO, taking Ingrid's wallet from the table. There was lingering doubt about whether Corey might have taken money from it. While Wilma had no reason to distrust Ingrid, who had shown nothing but love and dedication to Tio, he couldn't ignore the fact that Corey had been seen with the purse in her hands. Though Ingrid's suspicion of the nurse was grounded, baseless accusations were not something Wilma wanted to entertain. He needed clarity but also trusted that Ingrid's love for Tio and her good intentions were genuine. The situation was complex, with the camera footage only showing Corey holding the purse, but not definitively proving theft. Wilma wrestled with the uncertainty, torn between his trust in Ingrid and the pressing need to ensure that Tio's environment remained safe and secure. "You know," Ingrid said, her voice dripping with a harsh reality, "when someone is desperate for money, they might be driven to do much more than just steal a wallet. We don't know what kind of trouble Corey might be in. She could have debts or problems we don't even know about. Her story might just be a facade." Wilma had to admit that Ingrid had a point. When a person is in dire financial straits, desperation can lead them to actions that seem unthinkable. It was disheartening to accept, but the possibility that Corey had indeed taken the money seemed increasingly likely. After their conversation, Ingrid poured herself a glass of white wine and savored it with exotic fruits, her mood triumphant. She felt a dark satisfaction, believing she had achieved what she wanted. "You've had a taste of a decent life," she thought with cruel satisfaction. "Now it's time for you to return to your old, useless existence." Later that evening, as Ingrid entered Tio's room, the little boy looked up with curiosity. "Where's Corey?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. Ingrid shrugged nonchalantly. "Corey doesn't work for us anymore." She moved to open the window, letting in a chill breeze. Why? Tio's voice was filled with sadness and confusion. "Because your precious Corey stole my money," Ingrid said with a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Tio's face clouded with disbelief. "You're lying. Corey's good and you're just being mean." Ingrid's grin widened, unfazed by his accusations. "If you don't want to believe it, that's your problem." Tio shivered and asked, "Can you close the window, please? I'm cold." Ingrid hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly closed the window. The following day, Tio's condition worsened. He complained weakly, "I don't feel well." Ingrid's irritation was palpable as she rolled her eyes. "What's wrong with you now?" she asked, her tone dismissive. Tio's face was flushed, and his eyes had an unhealthy, feverish gleam. Ingrid's demeanor remained cold and unfeeling as she dealt with the boy's distress. Her thoughts focused more on her grievances than on providing the care Tio needed. "Give me the syrup," Tio whispered, his voice frail and trembling. Ingrid's face hardened as she snapped back. "What syrup? You don't even know what you need, and now you're asking about syrup." Her frustration was evident, her tone sharp and dismissive. "Why did you send Corey away?" Tio's eyes were filled with both confusion and hurt. "I've already told you," Ingrid said, her voice cold and stern. "Corey is a thief. I don't want to hear another word about her. Do you understand?" Tio, perceptive beyond his years, realized he wasn't going to get any comfort from his stepmother. "I'll wait for Daddy," he said quietly. Ingrid begrudgingly handed him the syrup before leaving the room. She considered opening the window to let in some fresh air, but decided against it when Tio complained of being too cold. As Tio lay in bed, his condition worsened, not just from the illness but from the emotional neglect. He felt a deep sense of abandonment, realizing that Corey had been the only one who genuinely cared for him. While his father loved him dearly, his long work hours meant he was often absent. Ingrid, on the other hand, seemed indifferent to Tio's well-being, preoccupied only with her own needs and Wilma's money. After being dismissed from her job, Corey faced severe hardship. She spent 2 nights at a hostel, searching desperately for some form of shelter. With dwindling hope, she considered whether anyone might offer her a place to stay in exchange for work or a loan. Her optimism, however, was rapidly diminishing as each opportunity slipped away. Determined not to succumb to despair, Corey visited the area where she and Steve had previously rented an apartment. The neighborhood was notorious for its low prices due to its high crime rates, but she had no other options. Miraculously, she found someone willing to rent her a small, run-down apartment. However, this luck was marred by the grim reality of her new situation. The landlord, a heavy drinker who lived next door, provided the tiny apartment in a state of neglect. The space was filthy, reeking of stale cigarette smoke, and offered little comfort. Yet in Corey's dire circumstances, it was a roof over her head, a small respite from the harshness of living on the streets. "I expect the rent at the end of the month," the landlord growled, his voice slurred from drink. Corey, desperate and hopeful, agreed with a nod. She knew she needed to secure some work quickly and was determined not to reveal her pregnancy to potential employers. Her new landlord, a heavy drinker with a penchant for demanding immediate payment, made frequent visits to her meager apartment to ask about the money. But it's not the end of the month yet. Is it? Corey would respond each time, aware that his requests likely had more to do with his drinking habits than any real need. Finally, Corey managed to land a job at a food delivery service. The administrator at the service informed her, "We pay weekly." Corey's spirits lifted. This was a stroke of luck she hadn't anticipated. With this payment schedule, she could manage her rent and start to see a brighter future. After a week of diligent work, Corey stocked her fridge and set aside money for rent. Just as things seemed to be looking up, misfortune struck. While leaving the shopping center laden with deliveries, Corey suddenly fainted. Her concerned supervisor called an ambulance. In the hospital, a doctor looked at her with concern. "Given your condition, carrying such heavy loads is dangerous," he said. "You're at risk of a miscarriage, so you'll need to stay here for a couple of days." Corey's heart sank. She had only worked 2 days that week and feared she wouldn't be paid for her incomplete work. No work means no pay, she thought despondently. How will I manage the rent now? At least the hospital was a more comfortable refuge than her dismal apartment. From her hospital bed, Corey called her landlord and explained her situation, asking for an extension of 1 more week. She hoped his understanding nature might come through, but the landlord was unsympathetic. "I don't care about your problems," he interrupted her pleas. "Do you have any money at all?" Corey, trying to salvage the situation, replied, "Yes, there's some money in the kitchen cupboard under the blue teapot." She hoped that by showing she had some funds, he might be lenient. Her optimism was unfortunately misplaced. The landlord's face twisted into a greedy grin as he responded, "That's good. I'll take all the money. That's 1 month's rent and my compensation for the inconvenience. And you should know, you're not welcome to stay here any longer. I don't tolerate irresponsible tenants." The landlord's harsh words and the immediate demand for payment left Corey devastated. She realized her situation was more precarious than ever. With no home and no job, her future seemed as bleak as ever. "Where can I get the key?" Wilma asked, a hint of frustration in his voice. Corey replied, her tone heavy with resignation, "It's at the city hospital. I'll leave it with the lady on duty." Ingrid watched from the doorway as Tio stared dismally at his plate of pasta, barely touching his food. "Why aren't you eating?" she demanded, irritation evident in her voice. "I don't want to," Tio mumbled, pushing the plate away. His longing for Corey was palpable, but he knew better than to mention her. Talking about her would only lead to Ingrid's harsh criticism and accusations. Wilma returned home from a business trip, his face lighting up with a warm smile. "How's everyone doing?" he asked cheerfully. Ingrid, with a practiced sweetness, greeted him with a kiss. "We're fine," she purred. Wilma's smile widened. "That's great. Where's Tio?" "In his room," Ingrid answered, trying to sound casual. When Wilma saw his son, his heart sank. Tio looked drastically different, pale, gaunt, and forlorn. Wilma's heart clenched with concern. "Are you sick again?" Wilma asked, his voice filled with worry. "Dad, can Corey come back?" Tio asked tearfully, his voice quivering. The sight of his son's pale, tear-streaked face left Wilma momentarily at a loss. "Son, I wish he could come back. But it's just not possible," Wilma said, struggling to contain his despair. He glanced at Ingrid, seeking confirmation if Tio was aware of the theft. Ingrid gave a barely perceptible nod. "Daddy, I know Ingrid thinks Corey stole the money," Tio said, his voice steady despite his tears. "But it's not true. Corey is good and Ingrid is bad. I was cold, and she opened the window for me." Ingrid's patience snapped. "What are you talking about?" Good or bad, her frustration was evident as she interrupted, unable to keep her composure any longer. Wilma was taken aback, struggling to understand the situation. Ingrid began to explain, her tone dripping with exasperation. "If only it were that simple. There's more to this than you know." "Ingrid, please don't yell at the child," Wilma said quietly but with a firm edge to his voice. Ingrid looked startled. "I'm sorry," she stammered, "but you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," Wilma interrupted, his voice calm but resolute. "While I was away, Tio fell ill again. Doesn't that give us a reason to consider his request?" Ingrid was taken aback, her eyes widening. "Are you going to hire her again?" she asked in disbelief. "If it truly helps Tio," Wilma said, nodding. "And I need to hear Corey's side of the story." With that decision made, Wilma immediately set out to find Corey. It was no small task. Corey had no permanent address. All he had was the address of the apartment she shared with her ex, but given their breakup, it seemed unlikely she would return to him after such a betrayal. Still, he hoped that maybe she had some acquaintances there. It was worth a shot. The neighborhood where he began his search was run down, starkly contrasting with Wilma's usual surroundings. He showed Corey's picture to the locals, but most simply shrugged. Just as he was about to give up, a glimmer of hope appeared. "Yes, I saw that girl yesterday," said a middle-aged woman in a flowered dress and worn sweater. "She rented an apartment in that building over there, on the first floor." "Thank you so much," Wilma said gratefully, and hurried to the building she had pointed out. At the entrance, he encountered 3 drunken men loitering nearby. Summoning his courage, he asked, "Excuse me, have any of you rented an apartment to a woman named Corey?" "Well, let's say I did," one of the men said with a toothy grin, revealing the few teeth he had left. "Let's say, or is it you?" Wilma pressed, his patience wearing thin. The man laughed, the sound punctuated by a hiccup. "Yeah, it's me. What do you want with her?" "I need to find her," Wilma said, his tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. "It's urgent." The man's grin faded, replaced by a more serious expression. "She's still living here, but I wouldn't expect her to be around much. She's been dealing with a lot of problems, poor thing." Wilma felt a mix of relief and concern. "Can you tell me which apartment she's in?" The man nodded slowly. "Sure, but you might want to prepare yourself. The place isn't exactly in the best shape." Wilma thanked him and made his way to the indicated apartment. As he approached, he felt a pang of anxiety, but he was determined to resolve the situation for Tio's sake. "Yes, she was my tenant," the landlord said, eyeing Wilma with a shrewd gaze. Wilma sensed the man was angling for financial gain. "I'll pay whatever you ask, as long as you provide useful information," he said, knowing the situation was urgent. The man, looking pleased, took the $50 and offered the information Wilma needed. Corey had indeed rented an apartment from him, but he had recently evicted her due to unpaid rent. "And do you have any idea where she might be now?" Wilma asked, hoping for a lead. "She was at the city hospital the day before yesterday. She called and begged for an extension, but I told her no. I'm not running a charity." Wilma nodded, handing over the money and leaving the building with a heavy heart. What kind of person kicks a pregnant woman out like that, he thought bitterly. He was dismayed at the callousness of the landlord, but his concern was deeper. If Corey had indeed stolen the money, how had she ended up without the means to pay for her temporary lodging? The answer was clear to Wilma: Corey hadn't stolen anything. Ingrid must have been lying, and Corey had never been compensated for her work. Wilma felt a surge of shame and frustration. Corey had been diligent in her job, and Tio had grown fond of her. "I have to find her," he resolved, hurrying to the city hospital, hoping she was still there. At the hospital, Wilma saw Corey lying in a bed, looking pale and weary. "Threatened miscarriage," she said with a sad smile. Wilma's heart ached to see her in such a state. He realized she had been through a lot and had fallen ill while working hard to support herself and her unborn child. "How did things go at the delivery service?" Wilma asked. raising an eyebrow in concern. "Well," Corey replied weakly, "I started looking for a new job after Ingrid dismissed me. I managed to get a position at a delivery service, but my health deteriorated." "Corey, I need to address the matter of your dismissal," Wilma began, struggling to find the right words. "It's a delicate issue." Corey, sensing his hesitation, spoke up. "Mr. Castro, I want to clarify that I didn't steal your wife's purse. I did take it, but I didn't look inside. I only wanted to return it to her." Her voice was filled with desperation, and Wilma could see the truth in her eyes. "I believe you," Wilma said softly, "and I want to offer you a chance to come back." Corey's face lit up with a glimmer of hope. "Agreed, but I'm afraid your wife might not allow me to work again." Wilma nodded, understanding her concern. "We'll handle that. For now, let's focus on getting you back on your feet and ensuring Tio's well-being. We'll work things out." With that, Wilma began making arrangements to reinstate Corey and resolve the misunderstandings with Ingrid, determined to make things right for his family and the woman who had shown such dedication and care. "I'll take care of my wife." "Good. Then I agree," Corey nodded, her relief palpable. "Well, now rest and take care of yourself," Wilma said with a reassuring smile. "We're looking forward to seeing you back with us." The doctors worked diligently, and Corey's condition stabilized. Wilma and Tio came to the hospital to pick her up on the day of her discharge. "I'm very glad you're coming back," Tio said earnestly, his little face brightening with joy. Ingrid's reaction was mixed. She pressed her lips together in frustration but chose to remain silent. In her mind, she was resigned to the situation. Oh, these persistent people. You close one door, and they find another way, and Ingrid thought with irritation. She decided it was pointless to try and undermine Corey further, knowing that Wilma would not be swayed by any more accusations. With Corey's return, Tio's health rapidly improved. His cheeks regained their rosy color, and he thrived under Corey's care. They enjoyed outings together, exploring the zoo, amusement parks, and other places for children. On one such outing to the park, they found a stray puppy, whom they named Finn. Despite the renewed happiness in the household, Wilma was troubled by something. One day he expressed his gratitude to Corey. "Corey, you are simply a magician," he said. "Tio seems healthier and happier than ever. What exactly are you doing with him? It feels like miracles." Corey blushed at the compliment. "Oh, no miracles," she said modestly. "Tio's room was changed, and we adjusted the air temperature and medication. That's all." The mention of the room temperature triggered a troubling thought for Wilma. He recalled Tio's comment about being cold and Ingrid's decision to open the window despite the child's discomfort. Wilma had initially suspected construction issues, but now considered the possibility that Ingrid might have intentionally made Tio's room too cold. The thought that Ingrid might be deliberately harming his son was horrifying. Reluctantly, Wilma decided to arrange for an independent examination of the house to verify his suspicions. He hoped desperately that he was wrong and that his wife was not capable of such cruelty. The tension between Wilma and Ingrid grew as a result. During a casual conversation about household dynamics, Ingrid brought up the topic of whether it was appropriate for staff to dine with the family. "The staff, maybe," Wilma replied calmly, "but Corey has become a part of our family. She's helped Tio, and for that, I will always be grateful to her." Ingrid's face hardened, and she burst into tears. "I see how it is," she sobbed. "If you don't need me anymore, then it's time to end this charade. I'm filing for divorce. I can't stay with a man who doesn't love me at all." With that, Ingrid stormed out and retreated to their bedroom. Wilma was left in shock, trying to process the abrupt and painful turn in their relationship. The situation was dire, and he was torn between his loyalty to his son and the unraveling marriage. Ingrid's plans to manipulate Wilma had backfired spectacularly. Wilma, unimpressed by Ingrid's tactics, had swiftly and decisively ended their marriage, leaving Ingrid with nothing. The prenuptial agreement ensured that Ingrid received no assets or support. Wilma's parting words, pointing out Ingrid's failed attempts to deceive him and offering the results of the independent examination, were a final blow. Ingrid's anger and sense of betrayal drove her to drastic measures. That evening, she armed herself with gasoline and a lighter, determined to exact her revenge. The flames she started at the house where she had once lived were intended to disrupt Wilma's newfound happiness. Inside the house, Corey and Tio were enjoying a quiet evening, playing board games with Finn the puppy. The sudden smell of smoke went unnoticed at first, but it quickly became clear that something was wrong. "Corey, I'm scared," Tio's voice trembled as he looked at the smoke. "Stay calm, sweetheart," Corey said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She grabbed Tio and hurried towards the exit, urgency etched on her face. The fire's progress was swift, and she knew they had only moments before their escape route would be cut off. With Tio safely on the grass outside, Corey took a brief moment to catch her breath and assess the situation. The flames were already consuming parts of the house, their crackling sound mingling with the distant sirens of approaching emergency services. Wilma, returning home to find the house engulfed in flames, was horrified. He immediately called the fire department and rushed to ensure that Corey and Tio were safe. Seeing Corey and his son outside, he felt a pang of relief mixed with frustration over the chaos Ingrid had caused. As the fire raged, Wilma's mind was racing. He had to ensure Corey and Tio's safety first and deal with the aftermath later. Ingrid's destructive actions had put everyone in danger, but for now, the priority was to support Corey and Tio through this traumatic event. Once the fire was under control and the smoke cleared, Wilma vowed to rebuild and ensure that Corey and Tio would not have to face any more hardship. He realized that Ingrid's vindictiveness had not only jeopardized their lives, but also exposed the depth of her malice. In the aftermath, as the smoke settled and the damage was assessed, Wilma focused on helping Corey and Tio find a new home and ensuring they had everything they needed. Ingrid's parting threat of "he laughs best who laughs last" was met with Wilma's determination to create a positive future for his son and his caretaker, despite the adversities they had faced. The fire had devastated everything that Wilma had worked so hard for, but it also became the catalyst for a profound transformation in his life. Corey's brave actions during the blaze, risking her life to save Finn, only deepened Wilma's feelings for her. Her resilience and unwavering commitment to Tio and Finn had shown Wilma the depth of her character, and he realized how much she meant to him. As the smoke cleared and the house was reduced to rubble, Wilma was faced with the reality of Ingrid's malice. The cameras had captured Ingrid's criminal act, but her subsequent mental breakdown had led to her being committed to a psychiatric hospital. It was a bitter end to a toxic relationship. Corey's recovery was slow but steady. Her injuries were serious, but the love and support she received from Wilma and Tio helped her through the pain. Wilma, deeply moved by her bravery and kindness, spent every moment he could by her side. His feelings for Corey grew stronger each day, and he was determined to build a future together with her. One day, Wilma visited Corey in the hospital with Tio. The warmth of their family bond was palpable, and the love between Wilma and Corey was undeniable. When Wilma confessed his love and asked if she would stay with him, Corey's heart swelled with happiness. She had found not only a partner but a family who truly cared for her. After Corey's rehabilitation, the couple married in a small, intimate ceremony. The new year brought a new chapter to their lives as they welcomed a baby girl into the world. This new addition to their family filled their home with joy and laughter. Wilma, Corey, and Tio, along with their new baby, had faced incredible hardships but emerged stronger and more united than ever. The love and dedication they shared created a warm and supportive home, making the new year and the arrival of their daughter the happiest moments in their lives. They had rebuilt their lives from the ashes and found true happiness together, embracing the future with hope and love. What an incredible journey we've witnessed today. From the highs of personal growth and redemption to the lows of adversity and betrayal, Corey and Wilma's story is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the impact of genuine compassion. As we wrap up this story, we'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from Corey and Wilma's experiences? How can their story inspire or influence your own life? Share one key takeaway that you'll be bringing into your practices and experiences. Your insights could be incredibly valuable to others who are facing similar challenges. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring content. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.